Good morning, everyone. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to the 2021 Conference on Women's Economic Empowerment that's sponsored by the Women's Economic Imperative. This has become a part of a tradition for us, starting in 2018 when WEI hosted a conference at Wilton Park with the UK government. And in 2019, we had another physical meeting in Edinburgh, Scotland, which was the last time we had a physical meeting. And again, this year, we're doing it virtually. I want to thank everyone for making the time to be part of this important discussion. And I want to encourage everyone that as we engage on these topics and as you share your views and as you make your recommendations, that somewhere we find the room to commit to the action. It's easy always to talk and to think and to engage in intellectual discussions. And the challenge for me always has been, what is it that each and every one of us can commit to doing in some small way as individuals, but then also through our institutional affiliations, through our community networks, because this is where the work gets done. This is where the sausage gets made, and this is where we make a difference in what we do. So I want to put this on the table as we in this conference come to look at the issues that confront women and girls, particularly on the back of the COVID-19 pandemic that continues to hold us all hostage in many respects. And we know very well that the social, economic, and health issues of the pandemic disproportionately impact women and girls. So I would like for us to really think, when we talk about increasing resilience, building forward better, those are catchphrases. But the challenge is to ensure that the issues impacting women and girls are not an add-on at the end, but they're very much part of the solutions that are being designed, and the voice of women and girls are part of the creation and the building of those solutions. And I see this event as contributing to that. The chair of the WEI board, Mr. Amadou Ba, was going to join me in welcoming you today. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic and the travel issues, he is still in the air and won't be able to join us, but he will before the end of the conference. He's asked me to offer his regrets and to assure us that he continues to be committed to these issues, a very vocal and visible champion who's leveraging his role in the public space to speak to these issues. And so I wanted to share his regards. The conference, as for those of you who have read the background note on the conference, is really rooted, the work of WEI is rooted in the efforts of the United Nations High-Level Panel on Women's Economic Empowerment that was completed in 2017. And on today's panel, you will hear from one of the co-chairs of that panel, the high-level panel, Simona Scarpaleggia, in terms of why this focus on women's economic empowerment continues to be important, and why the work that was started under Ban Ki-moon's leadership of the United Nations is so critical today as we confront the issues impacting women and girls as a result of the pandemic. We've organized the conference, the structure of the conference really, around the work the panel did in identifying the key drivers of women's economic empowerment as they relate to the SDGs. And more recently, Secretary General Guterres has identified 5 key building blocks for the response to the pandemic and the efforts to increase resilience. I want to share those with you because you will hear these issues coming through in our discussions throughout the conference. The first one is about realizing equal rights for all, and particularly women's equal rights. The reason why I'm referencing equal rights for all is because I imagine that many of us, and myself included, are quite troubled by the emerging trend that we're seeing, where there's a fundamental, apparent rollback on the respect for the rights to life, dignity, and fulfillment on the part of every human being. It's not an overstatement as we see the nationalistic efforts or the apparent marginalization of peoples based on race and ethnicity, and the diminution of the value of human beings that seems to be taking the world by storm. And we have to start there in addressing this issue, not taking it for granted. I think we have to recommit as human beings to recognizing that each human being has a right, has rights, inalienable rights, and we need to respect those. And based on that, then we could look at the fact that half of the world's population is comprised of women and girls, and therefore we need to respect their rights as well. And this cuts across, we look at the SDGs, we look at political trends. It's a worrying trend that we're seeing of an apparent rollback on some of these rights that we may have thought were well established. As with all things, it starts with each and every one of us if we're going to make that change. And as I said at the beginning, I really want us to, as we contemplate these issues, to recognize that each and every one of us has a role to play. And the questions we need to ask ourselves is, how can I make a difference in the way in which I see people, and therefore in the way in which others see me, and the way in which our leaders, we communicate to our leaders. We need to see each other, regardless of race, ethnicity, or gender. The dignity and the rights of every human being, I think, is something that we really, really need to reaffirm. The second building block relates to ensuring representation and agency of women generally, particularly in the economic space around issues of education and health. But these are all critical for the economic empowerment of women. Again, with the trend, I would never, ever have thought that I would even in this country, here in the public discourse, a call for women, the right of women to vote to be taken away. And indeed, just this weekend, I heard that. We're all reading the headlines. And so again, I just want to put these things on the table because I think that part of we have to understand the reality, and therefore be willing to articulate and to respond to the issues as they emerge, particularly in areas where we have the ability to influence others. The third building block relates to advancing women's economic inclusion and with a strategic focus on entrepreneurship policy, entrepreneurial ecosystems that support women entrepreneurship, particularly digital access, financing, and entrepreneurship education. These are all issues that WEI is particularly honing in on and trying to take action on. The fourth, addressing violence against women. The pandemic has really, we've seen a surge in the issues of violence against women, trafficking of women and girls and boys, unfortunately. And this violence within households, outside of households, has imposes significant costs on societies. There's a lot of work that's being done that speaks to the intergenerational impacts of violence and what I call the collusion, the societal and cultural collusion that allows this to continue to happen. Another area in which I think we need to be proactive, and each and every one of us in our own way can take some action to try to change that. And the final building block relates to youth. So the issues of women and girls, I always say, those of you who've heard me speak on this, is not a woman's issue, it's everybody's issue. And for the same reason, we need to ensure that boys and young men are also not just taken care of, but they're engaged in the issues around of women and how they see and understand those issues, because the calculus is simple. If women are better off, everybody's better off. We need to see this here as a win-win for everyone, and it's not a zero-sum game. But we need to look at the next generation in terms of how we address their needs and how we support their growth and development. So without further ado, now that I've unloaded on you, but again, I really want to emphasize, this is what we're trying to achieve over the next 3 mornings, East Coast US time. And I hope that you will find plenty of room to engage, share your views, and of course, help us to think through some solutions to some of these problems and issues. So with that, I would like to declare the conference open to welcome all of you, and we will make a smooth transition. So no need to disconnect. We're staying in the same space. We will now transition to the beginning of the first session, where I have the joy of welcoming 3 very important voices on these issues. For technical reasons, I will pause so that we can stop the recording and restart it, because we want to be able to share this with you.